Hello and welcome to the Asian Chronicle. Today we revisit a chapter of history etched in blood and memory, the tribal invasion of Jammu and Kashmir in October 1947. A story of betrayal, brutality and resistance that not only changed the map of South Asia but scarred a region forever. Let us begin at the onset of this incursion. On October 22, 1947, just 2 months after India and Pakistan's independence, approximately 20 Lashkars, each comprising nearly 1,000 tribal raiders, crossed into the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir from Pakistan's tribal areas. These raiders, backed by Pakistani elements, launched a full-scale invasion to coerce Maharaja Hari Singh into joining Pakistan. Muzaffarabad was their first major target. The city had a significant Sikh population and it was mercilessly attacked. Sikh shrines such as Dera Gufa and Gurudwara Chhattis Patsai Naluchi were shelled. Hundreds of Sikhs, saints, women and children were massacred during early morning prayers. At Gurudwara Naluchi Sahib, young Sikhs and ex-servicemen defended the complex for 3 days without water. Unfortunately, not a single defender survived after that day. On the same day, Baramulla, a town just 35 miles from Srinagar, fell. The raiders plundered and razed it. Of the 14,000 non-Muslims, only 3,000 survived. The horrors were defying description. At the Catholic Franciscan missionary in Baramulla, the raiders murdered nuns, patients and priests alike. Sister Mary Teresalina, a Spanish nun, died trying to protect the Mother Superior. Her portrait still hangs at the hospital. A pamphlet titled, "I Will Be the First," tells her story. Her final words being, "I offer myself as a victim for the people of Kashmir." Now, Andrew Whitehead, in his book, A Mission in Kashmir, recounts how a number of Sikh women took shelter in this Catholic missionary but had to commit suicide when the raiders attacked this missionary. He states, "A medical missionary showing me around the convent grounds in Baramulla pointed to a disused well, which she insisted was where several local Sikh women died. So many Sikh women ran away from their homes and came to the hospital and took shelter in the wards, so it was overcrowded," she told me while standing by the well. The raiders spotted them, so they ran away from the hospital behind the convent and they came to this well where they committed suicide. It was covered actually with bodies, is what she said. That same day, on October 26, Maharaja Hari Singh fled to Jammu. Desperate and defeated, he reportedly told his ADC, "If VP Menon does not return for help by morning, shoot me in my sleep." Now, VP Menon did return with India's response. On October 26, the Maharaja signed the instrument of accession, formally joining India. That night, India's service chiefs began preparing for military deployment. On October 27th, Indian troops were airlifted into Srinagar. Among them were soldiers from Sikh regiment under the command of Colonel Ranjit Rai, who was martyred soon after. This marked the beginning of India's military defense of Kashmir, commemorated today as Infantry Day. The people of Srinagar greeted the soldiers with cheers, garlands and slogans of unity. As Sophie Ghulam Mohammad, the then editor of a local paper, recalled, "You invaders, beware. We Kashmiris are ready to fight you, and long live Hindu, Sikh, Muslim unity." Even as the Indian army pushed back the raiders, Pakistan continued planning. On October 27, the Pakistani Prime Minister held a secret conference in Lahore with Akbar Khan, the man behind the invasion codenamed Armed Revolt inside Kashmir. That same day, Muhammad Ali Jinnah himself ordered an attack on Jammu, blocked by British General Douglas Gracey, who refused without Lord Mountbatten's approval. On October 28, Akbar Khan rushed to Rawalpindi to ensure supply of ammunition to the raiders. By October 29, the invaders were just a few miles from Srinagar. And again, by October 31, they had surrounded the governor's residence, aided by Gilgit scouts and the Pakistani troops. A provisional government was informed with Sardar Ibrahim as its president. But resistance was still mounting. By November 7, Indian troops had driven the raiders from Srinagar's outskirts. Fierce fighting broke out in Uri, and Akbar Khan was dispatched to regain control. For days, gunfire echoed in the hills. The raiders' brutality cannot be overstated. In Baramulla, Father Nirmal Raj wrote of how many Sikh women ran into the river and drowned to avoid capture. Priests disguised Sikh and Hindu women by cutting their hair, dressing them in European clothes, but to little avail, as countless Hindu and Sikh women were abducted and sold in the bazaar of Peshawar, Rawalpindi and Jhelum for a few rupees. Journalist Sidney Smith documented Colonel Shah Pasand Khan, who led prayers before dinner, asking Allah to bless their holy war for the extermination of Sikhs. Ironically, it was the Sikh regiment that was airlifted on October 27 that ultimately repelled them. The raiders had hoped to approach Srinagar from multiple sides, but the city's geography, surrounded by water, forced them to use the main road. This bottleneck gave Indian troops a strategic advantage. In Baramulla, Maqbool Sherwani, a Kashmiri patriot, misled the raiders to protect Kashmir and Srinagar. His deception was uncovered. He was crucified, his body riddled with 14 bullets and hung between two poles. His death remains a symbol of sacrifice. On December 4, in 1947, Pakistan's leadership met again. Present were Akbar Khan, Pakistani generals, and British Commander-in-Chief General Messervy, who agreed to covert support. Messervy had earlier been handed charge of the Pakistan Army by Lord Mountbatten. By January 1, 1948, India took the issue to the United Nations. On April 21st, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 47 calling for an immediate ceasefire and the withdrawal of Pakistani tribesmen and nationals from Kashmir. That withdrawal never happened. By May 1948, the situation was rapidly deteriorating for Pakistan's tribal forces in Kashmir. Morale was at an all-time low. Akbar Khan, the architect of this tribal invasion, and Faiz Ahmad Faiz, the renowned poet, visited Muzaffarabad to assess the ground reality. Here, Akbar Khan later wrote, quote, "We were falling back everywhere and very rapidly. Panic had gripped the area. Civilians were deserting even Muzaffarabad and along the road to Chakoti. Frustrated by the Pakistani government's failure to launch a full-fledged military assault on India and its inability to capture Kashmir, both Akbar Khan and Faiz grew deeply disillusioned. This frustration led them down a darker path, the plotting of a coup. According to Akbar Khan's own book, on February 23, 1951, a secret meeting took place at his residence. It was attended by senior army officers and political allies, including Faiz Ahmad Faiz. This meeting marked the beginning of what became to be known as the Rawalpindi conspiracy. In that meeting, Akbar Khan proposed nothing short of a coup d'etat. Khan argued that meaningful action in Kashmir would require a new government, one that would fully back military operations. The proposed plan involved the dismissal of the current government and the arrest of Government General Khwaja Nazimuddin and Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan, who were expected to be in Rawalpindi the following week. The group even drafted a provisional declaration to justify this coup. The plot was, however, uncovered. Akbar Khan was court-martialed, convicted and sentenced to imprisonment. Faiz too was arrested, only to be later released. But this marked as one of the first major political conspiracies in Pakistan's history. Faiz's involvement in the attempted coup is an uncomfortable truth that is often brushed aside, especially when we quote his poetry today. His iconic poem, Hum Dekhenge, a stirring anthem of resistance, has been embraced by countless democratic movements, including India. Yet the same Faiz once conspired to topple a democratic government and install a military-backed regime. Years later, in a twist of irony and grace, Faiz was invited to India by none other than Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the then Indian foreign minister, on a goodwill trip. It's unclear if Vajpayee or the Indian establishment knew about Faiz's role in the Rawalpindi conspiracy. However, what is clear is that the art outlived the artist's politics. Meanwhile, back in 1947, the tribal invaders had proven to be anything but disciplined soldiers and patriotic volunteers. They were lured into assault with promises of loot, and they took full advantage. Entire truckloads of stolen goods, from gold and grain to bedsheets and neckties, were carted back across the border. They even stole furniture and kitchenware. This wasn't a liberation war, it was a state-sanctioned plunder. As one Pakistani officer remarked, the government even formed a liberation committee for Kashmir, with Akbar Khan as the military member. To hide his role from the British officers still commanding Pakistan's army, he was officially relieved of his duties and made military advisor to the Prime Minister, operating in secrecy. Colonel Sam Manik Shaw, who had flown into Srinagar with VP Menon on October 6, 1947, he later recounted, "Fortunately for Kashmir, the tribals were too busy raiding and raping all along the way. In Baramulla, they killed Colonel D.O.T. Dykes. Dykes and I were of the same seniority. We had trained together in Lahore in the 1930s. He and his wife were on a holiday in Baramulla when the tribesmen murdered them." Now, Tom Cooper, a military historian with the Air Combat Information Group, observed, "The Pathans appeared foremost interested in looting, killing, ransacking and other crimes against the inhabitants, instead of any serious military action." When the Indian army landed in Kashmir on October 27, they were met not with fear but with celebration. The city erupted with cheers, garlands and chants. Sophie Ghulam Muhammad, the then editor of a Srinagar newspaper, vividly recalled, "The raiders were viewed by most people, certainly in Srinagar, as invaders and not liberators. There were slogans echoing throughout the streets. 'You invaders beware, we Kashmiris are ready to fight you,' and 'Long live Hindu-Sikh Muslim unity.'" He added that most of the Indian soldiers were Sikhs. The Patiala Sikhs specifically, who formed part of the first Indian battalions in Kashmir, were cheered and garlanded. Srinagar had made its decision. The tribal invaders were not freedom fighters, they were opportunists and looters. Their violence left deep scars, and what happened in Kashmir in 1947 was not merely a geopolitical turning point, it was a humanitarian catastrophe. Communities were torn apart, homes were violated, and faith was desecrated. But it was met with resistance from Indian soldiers, Sikh defenders, and brave Kashmiris like Maqbool Sherwani, who gave their lives to protect the valley. Let us remember, the first war over Kashmir was not fought only between armies. It was fought in homes, hospitals, gurudwaras, and churches, and in the heart of every Kashmiri who resisted. We remember the pain, we remember the courage, and above all, we remember the truth. Not just for the sake of history, but for the promise of justice. This is Garima, and you are watching the Asian Chronicle.
sun.